Good morning. It is an honor to be part of this conference in Vilnius. It is always a pleasure to be here in Vilnius. And definitely I think work and ideas of Andrei Sakharov are an inspiration to all of us. I noticed that in the speakers list I'm probably the first currently serving government official, meaning that this might have an impact to what I say. I think I may need to be a bit more diplomatic, and it is also useful to look to the future, to look beyond the present sort of hybrid era. Supposedly there is one. Then on the other hand, I think I might be able to give some insights of government's work, how Finland works to counter hybrid threats, because providing security for the people who live in Finland, for the region globally, is an important task of the government. This is what we do. The fact that there is a hybrid ambassador, or actually ambassador to counter hybrid threats, referring to the fact that we would not do hybrid during the peacetime. The fact that there are ambassadors to counter hybrid threats, I think reflects the thing that malign influencing, hostile external activities are now a permanent part of our security environment in Europe or wider. It reflects the thing that I think, unfortunately, we do need to assume that the situation will continue. But also it reflects the fact that increasingly foreign and security policy has a role in countering hybrid threats. This topic is in bilateral agenda often when our leading politicians meet with their counterparts, in bilateral meetings, in multilateral meetings. EU is engaged. NATO is thinking, what is my role? How am I relevant in countering hybrid threats? Similarly is G7, for example. So is the OECD. And actually this is a positive thing. This is a good thing because glass is more than half full, in a sense that I think there are quite many big wheels starting to turn. So there are positive things as well. Presently I think there are 6 hybrid ambassadors within the EU countries. It is increasing. Also there are similar jobs with other titles. In Helsinki we have Center of Excellence for Countering Hybrid Threats. Presently there is 23 member states, and that has been growing rapidly as well. Now, the provoking name of this excellent conference is from the Cold War to the hybrid war. I think I'll have 2 parts in my presentation. One is something about Finland's history during the last century, perhaps more from the Finland's point of view. And then the other thing is present situation. What do we do to counter hybrid threats? History politics is used often as a tool of influence these days, and I think it might be on the increase again. That is very unfortunate. I think my government has a strong opinion and practice that we leave history to the historians. Government or parliaments would not take part in disputes concerning history. Nevertheless, I think I wish to offer a few personal remarks on history. The beginning of the Winter War in 1939, according to the Finnish history writing, Soviet Union shelled from Soviet Union the territory of the Soviet Union, blamed Finland for that. Which then was a casus belli, which was a reason for Soviet Union to start Winter War. After the war had begun, Helsinki was ready to negotiate. Stalin said that yes, obviously he's ready to negotiate with Finland. He said that he's already negotiating with Finland because the Finnish government, according to Stalin's view, was now sitting in a place called Terjoki, a small town 30 kilometers off of Leningrad, where there already was a new Soviet installed government for Finland in the Soviet territory. And Stalin continued that actually he has already agreed on all the things with the Finnish government. Well, this pseudo-government did not survive the Winter War. So, in a way, not much new. And at the same time, all war is hybrid. If hybrid war means creating use of the full spectrum of different tools that a nation possesses, something that has always been a reality when we speak about waging a war. Yes, during the Winter War, during the Second World War, Finland would use hybrid tools in the war. We do not do it during the peacetime. Also, I think hybrid influencing, malign external influencing, which is different from use of soft power, promoting Finnish sauna culture or promoting Finnish high technology. The use of hybrid influencing has always taken place. Hot rumors, malign rumors always spread fastest. But now, with the new technologies, and particularly I think in the present situation juncture, we're speaking of the cyber digitalization and also of disinformation, changed media sphere. New technology is predominantly a good thing, but it also offers instrument for those who want to use it in a negative thing, in a negative way against us. Technology will continue to develop. We can't turn the wheel back, but I think technology is not guilty of election hacking. That someone makes a decision, someone does a thing. And we would not need to use new technologies for malign influencing, for hybrid influencing. Now, continue on the history. Finland did not appear as a winner from the Second World War. Allied agreements during the war, Tehran especially, left pretty free, rather free hands for the Soviet Union when it comes to Finland. Therefore, the Soviet Union had a strong influence in Finland's politics during the Cold War. For example, a big say as to which political parties should not be included into Finnish government. There was an aim to have a Finnish government that would be acceptable in the Soviet Union's view when we think of security policy, friendly enough government. 50s, 60s, 70s, there was illegal financial support from the Soviet Union to the Communist Party of Finland. But incidentally, money flew in also from the United States, Langley, to other parties. This would not take place today, it would be unacceptable, but also illegal. And then yesterday, when our Dutch colleagues gave a presentation, they were asking the question, how about the influence? What was the impact? Now, if we think of the Soviet propaganda, disinformation during the Cold War, I think there's an argument that the impact was not that big in Finland. Because it reached those who were already thinking in the same way, who shared the same worldview as the Soviet Union, which was a very small one. And at the same time, at that time, Soviet disinformation was tied to ideology. It was clumsier. But I think this question of the impact is important today as well. I think we need to consider, among other things, aims. We need to look at activities and then impact of those adversaries who are behind of hybrid influence. Often activities might appear to be very big, but the impact is not always similarly big. And here I'm not belittling the threat and challenge of hybrid threats. Also, I think that we cannot directly compare the situation during the Cold War to the present. At least for Finland, our position, external position, was very different. We were in the grey zone. There would hardly be help from democratic Western countries should there have been a conflict. Yes, there were unnecessary compromises that Finnish politicians made during the Cold War, so-called Finlandization, use of the Soviet card, which is unfortunate. But at the same time, at the end of the Cold War, after 47 years, 1991, Finland had its former political and economic system. And yesterday, in an excellent presentation, Tatiana Yankelevich was speaking about the Russian idea, which seems to be a continuous topic. In June 2002, our former president, Mauno Koivisto, was in a radio interview in Russia, speaking among other things, and he's a veteran of the Second World War, of course. Speaking about the Russian idea, but then the interview asked, so what is the Finnish idea? And there our president said only one word answer, that it is to vyžit, to survive. So that the Finnish idea during the last century was survival. That, I think, is a rather dramatic answer for a Finn, as Finnish men typically are said not to have emotions. Now, if we compare the situation during the Cold War and now, projecting present values and attitudes to the past, or assessing past through the present lenses does not necessarily work. But I think in Finland's case, still the past, the Cold War, is very close, is very near history. So here the coin has two sides as well. And therefore I think this topic, what happened, how big the threat was, were some of the actions of Finnish politicians that might be seen compromising from today's perspective, were they justified or not. But this is a matter for historians. Now, on the present, how do we counter hybrid threats? And still a brief visit to the history. In the 1950s, we created so-called comprehensive security model in Finland. There the idea was to create a unity, very close interagency, interministerial cooperation, tie in private companies, NGOs and the citizens. The idea was preparedness. The idea was that if we cooperate closely, then we are bigger than our size, and that would bring us security in a very fragile, challenging situation, in a security situation that was more dangerous than today. Now, that comprehensive security model, which actually was sort of an outdoor museum 10 years ago. There was Finland, Russia, Turkey and Greece. Today, after 2014, it is seen as a very avant-gardist model, and many countries wish to visit and come and study us, which we are very happy to explain what we are doing. But at the same time, I think our system is tied to the history, culture, equality, and things that cannot be. I mean, if I produce world's best cell phones, I can sell it easily, but a system is more difficult to export. But obviously, we are proud and very happy to tell about our system. Now, in the post-2014 situation, we have added several elements to the already existing system. 2014, it's important to notice that I think the present hybrid threats, so that the present use of them, did definitely not start in 2014. It started earlier. But Finland was one of those countries within the EU, or the same with the NATO, where I think our eyes opened, where we changed our eyeglasses and changed, we realized that the security has changed and we need to do something. So I think several things have been added. There are different new elements when it comes to the situational awareness capability, exchange of information and working modes. Not in all the countries, but Finland is an example of the country where, for example, we've realized that it is useful to involve intelligence services more closely to the work of the government, more closely than before. Because in the hybrid environment, we need situational awareness in order for politicians to be able to make decisions. And often some of the information lies with the intelligence services. We've had a strong focus on disinformation, countering it, and on our own Stratcom, training civil servants, journalists, big media houses, not telling journalists and media houses what to write about, but telling how we see the situation, and obviously then they do how they will. This morning I noticed in the news that Finland's BBC, our national public broadcasting service, has opened an interesting game called Your First Day in the Troll Factory, where you can enter the game and start building a trolling disinformation campaign, and I think there are some elements. I hope it is an interesting game. Kids play so much these days. Another example, I think, if you Google CNN's special report that came out last weekend, there's a title, Finland is winning war on fake news. A longish article, I think, very flattering for us, suggesting that there are some lessons for the Western democracies. I hope it is true what the article agrees. At the end of it, however, a Finnish specialist is saying that we might have had a round 1 or round 2 in countering disinformation, but this is an ongoing game presently, and I think that is an important message. One of the elements that different countries in Europe have done, and I think our list is a bit longer, would be something called legal resilience, which I think is a bad term, but meaning that creating new legislation to the new situation. We have closer to 20 different examples. Next month, first of it, our new intelligence laws will be in power, giving particularly new powers to our intelligence, civilian and military one to operate in digital environment. We've changed our territorial survival act, territorial surveillance act. Now, unlike before, one is allowed to use lethal force against a military group without insignia. A small thing, but symbolized. There are new legislation on controlling purchase and ownership of real estates or strategic pieces of land, with the government having a right to purchase in certain situations. Smaller, but I think a useful thing is a law concerning drones, unmanned aerial vehicles, how to bring them down if need be. It is an election week. European parliamentary elections, I think, are very important this weekend. And obviously Lithuania has elections as well, presidential ones. Our parliamentary elections took place in the middle of last month. Obviously, in this new situation, election interference has been one of the major elements that we have seen. And I think it is unfortunate that adversary is targeting as a vulnerability democratic elections, because that is very hard of how we organize our societies. Before our national elections, we organized a pretty big campaign in order to increase awareness. Candidates were briefed, so were the parties. What have we seen? What has taken place? Why is it that you should protect your data? Why is it necessary that you make sure that your social media platforms won't be hijacked? And what might, for example, the cyber operations DDoS do vis-a-vis elections? Also, the election officials were trained, media was approached. At the end, there was a TV campaign on trying to build trust to the elections, us to the integrity of our democratic systems, which I think is an important thing. Through this campaign, I think it was possible to build wider understanding on hybrid threats, what they mean for us these days, without exaggerating the thing. And I think when it comes to the elections, it's also important to accept and understand, and this is also resilience, understand that open society is permanently vulnerable when it comes to democratic elections, when it comes to pluralism, when it comes to rule of law. It takes several years to build up court cases. Authoritarian systems can function very fast, they can do things on us very fast, but in the longer run, I think open society does prevail. It will provide better lives to us, to our citizens, better possibilities for economic growth, innovativeness. Last November, there was it was noticed publicly. Civilian Aviation Agency gave a warning to our airplanes that there was a GPS jamming, GPS interference in the northern Finland. That's when Finland reacted publicly, meaning that we noticed that this interference came from the territory of Russian Federation, and our President and Prime Minister took it up publicly. We attributed, we reacted. Now, I think this is an important thing for the governments. It is important to speak about the definition of the hybrid, that's one thing. But for the governments operationally, how should one react? When should one react when we are hit by hybrid activity? This is something I think that many governments are considering in Europe these days. What should we do? I think there can be some sort of a criteria. For example, we do not need to accept behavior when it's illegal, when it's against international norms, when it does downgrade our sovereignty, when it hits our sovereignty. This is when Greece reacted last summer, expelled Russian diplomats when they had been organizing protests in Athens against solving the name dispute concerning Macedonia, Northern Macedonia. Or when this activity clearly endangers security of our citizens, or anything similar. I think we need to be flexible. We need to have case-by-case decisions. But our approach presently is that when it happens, then case-by-case one needs to react. Yes, I very strongly subscribe to the idea of actor agnosticism or country agnosticism, meaning that when we counter hybrid threats, we do not a priori counter any country. We don't say, hey, no, Sweden, New Zealand, they are bad countries and we want to counter them. No, we counter phenomenon. But when a phenomenon happens, GPS interference or anything, then I think it's a natural question people will ask, okay, well that's bad, who's behind it? And then
New Zealand?
Theoretically could be. Not that often, luckily so far when it comes to Finland. But then I think the government will have a need to, as we did in the GPS case. Finland has EU presidency during the second half of this year, and I think we are the first EU presidents that will have countering hybrid threats as one of the expressed priorities of our presidency. Meaning, among other things, that the EU should aim is that the EU should have more strategic, more coherent approach to countering hybrid threats. More pragmatically, this means that the EU actually is doing a lot of things. Many people don't know. We would need to coordinate, put this work together concretely, for example, to establish a regular council working group on countering hybrid threats. We are organizing exercises at the ministerial level, tabletop exercises at the ministerial level meetings as well as the high officials meeting on hybrid theme. In international cooperation, I think in Finland, good work is done by the Center of Excellence on countering hybrid threats. Presently there's 23 member states out of 35. All the EU, all the NATO countries can join. And if we count EU plus NATO, 28 plus 29, that's 35. That builds cooperation. And cooperation translates into unity, and unity means security for all of us. I think the Center of Excellence is doing a valuable projects, giving direction to the work of EU, NATO countries, as well as bringing together EU and NATO, which is always challenging. The Center of Excellence gives impetuses. In 2 weeks' time, I think, the Center of Excellence, Finnish Foreign Ministry, and the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office, we are incidentally organizing a conference. Hopefully there will be a written product at the end of this year on deterrence and hybrid. How do we build deterrence to the hybrid realm? What does deterrence mean in hybrid? I think it is absolutely possible to deter, but we need to do this also more knowledgeably, more systematically. Finally, I think to end these days, and after the changed security environment in Europe, which obviously the main point was 2014, Russia's occupation, illegal annexation of Crimea, Russia's role in starting the war in eastern Ukraine. Also, our security concept. Security has worsened, security concept in Europe has changed. We've moved from human security more towards the hard and traditional security, which in a way is necessity, but of course at the same time it is unfortunate. Therefore, we use lots of D words today, that is deterrence, defense, determination. However, I think in general, but also more specifically in hybrid, some E words are still useful as well, as our minister has pointed out. Apart from the D, also E words such as economy, education, equality, things that raise public awareness and understanding, things that make your country worth defending. These E words are also not to be forgotten. Thank you.
Very interesting presentation, thank you, Ambassador, and it's telling a lot already that Finland has such a position as yours. It's a testament to how in your country you take these threats seriously, and that's how you should. I think if you are in any country in our environment, and I've been to Finland months ago, I mentioned to you for a week, and I talked to people there, and I was very aware of how people are treating this seriously, these hybrid threats coming from theoretically New Zealand and other places as well. I think that the experience that Finland gained is a very useful one that we can use as well in our countries, and you can share. For one, there was one major unprecedented success in using the rule of law and the court system to fight the worst abusers in that respect. And I'm talking about the Jessica Aro situation. She was finally treated fair by Finnish system, mistreated by State Department, but that's a different story. That you can actually use the rule of law and courts to deal with people who are bullying, who are abusing, who are threatening. That's a big deal, and that's a major, I think, piece of experience that Finland can offer to all of us, because there should be a line between on one side disagreeing with what you write, and another side sending threats, calling on the phone and threatening your family and so on. The two questions that I have, that was a comment, the questions that I have more methodological nature. First, you have mentioned that national contexts matter. So you cannot really create a system for everyone else, you can only think what Finland does and should do in that respect. And I should commend you on this. I've just read a post on CNN report on that subject, that Finland is winning the war on fake news, and I think Robert, who's not here now, shared that on Facebook as well. So that's some manifestation of some successes that you have. But that being true, the national context, peculiar, particular context that matters, can you say that sharing the experience would be of use, in your opinion, with others? And in general, how much coordination across the borders do you feel is needed on dealing with these threats? That's the first question. The second question, you are, as you mentioned in the first sentence, basically representation, a government person. Do you think the government should lead that fight against the current threats? Or is it more for the civil society, the think tanks, experts, the media to deal with that? Or is it some kind of a coherent joint effort with both sides, public and private? Again, in your experience, what's the best ideal format for dealing with such threats? Thank you.
Thank you, Volodymyr, for your kind words and the question. Related to the commentary, yes, last August I think there was a court decision in Finland because a journalist called Jessica Aro had been harassed constantly. Her harassment started when she revealed functioning of the troll factory in St. Petersburg, and it had continued. I think that was a tough case for the court, because we're not used to dealing, courts are not used to dealing at the online environment, because it's sort of who's the editor and stuff like that. But then I think one realization was that some of the offline old laws are functional in the online environment. You cannot persecute or harass a person. I think there's even legislation on hate speech and stuff. So eventually the court took a decision emphasizing that freedom of speech is important, but harassment and persecution is different. I think they explain it for about 200 pages. So I think that was an important decision. The sharing, I think sharing and international cooperation happens all the time. It is important that we do not reinvent the bicycle, because I mean, it will look what happened in the United States or in France with the elections, when there is hack, steal, which is illegal, when there is systematic disinformation at the crucial moment of the election cycle, amplifying with the social media. There, when we start to think of the tools that are used in election interference, there I think you can already list a whole bunch of them. So international sharing is extremely important. My job actually is international cooperation, because I strongly believe that the more we cooperate, the more united we are, and if we are united, then our security is better. And this unity at the international level benefits our national work and vice versa. If nationally there's an important network for cooperation, we need to build similar ones internationally and then connect these two. And I don't think this is theoretical. We share, and there are, perhaps not so clear, but there are some publications on our national comprehensive security system model and how it works. We get lots of visitors from different countries. Your country has been in Helsinki, so has Singapore, among other things, Australia, and then the European countries. We coordinate, work together closely with the Baltic and Nordic countries. If you wish to read, there is an interesting publication online, which is Russia's footprint on the NB8 media environment or public sphere that we did together, and together with the NATO COE of Stratcom Riga. Yes, I think sharing is important. We are more than happy to open and explain our system. But the challenge with it, I mean, the system serves us very well. This created us bigger than our size was during the Cold War, which was needed. It saved us, saved our independence, or helped to save it. But then again, if I speak with the people from Spain, then they would say that your national system is great. It's great, but we could not use it in Spain because it resembles Franco times. Or if we speak with the colleagues from former socialist countries, that they more or less say the same thing. So what serves one country is not necessary solution, but I think there are impetuses, ideas and elements at least that are useful for sharing. Who should lead the work? Government, I think, has capabilities that is more aware of things that are taking place, maybe has more early warnings, and specialists on security. So government clearly has a role, but at the same time, I think public NGOs, individuals, are very important opinion makers. Big part of hybrid threats is systematic malign disinformation, meaning that information sphere is a, well, battlefield might be strong. There, I think, the more people you have there, the better. In Nordic countries, we tend to believe in public awareness and understanding and education. We think that is resilience, but also could be classified as deterrence.
Hello, my name is Alexander. I'm Poland-based also journalist. Thank you for very interesting speech. From one hand, it was all about it. From the other hand, you didn't mention that directly. I mean, the main factor of Finnish resilience is high level of social justice and social integrity. Because when it comes to hybrid and proxy activities, they always try to use social or national or religious groups who feel expelled, who feel offended, who feel some insecure or injustice. Finland didn't allow to do that, and that is why signature on agreement of Finnish proxy government in 1940, which was signed by Putin, was made in Russian. And of course it also had influence. So could you please elaborate a little about it? Thank you very much.
If the question is about trust, I think believing in ourselves is important, believing in our systems, because it is unfortunate that democracy is targeted, or pluralism is abused, or freedom of speech. I think Nordic countries are typically trust societies, so we need to keep up that trust in our countries. And I think you're right, also in a sense that adversary tries to see what are the big divisive lines within the societies, what are the causes for public dispute. If we go back to this NB8, Nordic Baltic 8, I think in the Baltic countries they would typically be language minorities, whereas presently, particularly post-2015, in Finland, in the Nordic countries, it would be the question of refugees and asylum seekers, which has been used in different ways as a tool for hybrid influencing. I think we quite well understand what has taken place with the elections. Obviously, there might be new possibilities. Obviously, imagination always sets the limits for hybrid actor. But the elections we understand quite well. I think this irregular migration thing, something that particularly has popped up ever since 2015. The dynamisms there and the tools used, that I think is something that we should study more and increase our understanding.
Last question.
Thank you for a very thoughtful talk. And particularly, I was glad that you brought up the criminally understated New Zealand threat. I want to talk a little bit more about this issue of solidarity between countries, which is crucial. I remember I was in Moscow at the time when British Prime Minister May announced the expulsion of Russian spies following the Skripal attempted poisoning. And then there was the inevitable Russian tit-for-tat expulsions. And certainly everyone I was speaking to in Moscow, in official circles, seemed to think that was going to be the end to it. The usual and entirely predictable moves. And then there was this great chain of international expulsions in solidarity, which really seems to have caught them by surprise and was a very salutary shock to them. The thing that strikes me is too often we tend to think of most other manifestations of hybrid war, espionage, subversion, hacks and things, as something that's basically for the individual country to deal with. The great strength of NATO, after all, had always been Article 5. The notion that an attack on one is an attack on all. And I mean, what I'd be interested to hear more about, particularly in the context of the coming Finnish presidency, is actually whether more can be done precisely to ensure that there's more of a mechanism for solidarity. Because after all, if the Russians don't know it's coming, then it's going to have much less of a deterrent effect. To ensure that actually hybrid threats will get a multinational response.
Thank you, Mark. That's an excellent question. I think I'm happy to have this as a last question, because an important part of my work is, and I think all the hybrid ambassadors' work is to produce international cooperation and promote that. Salisbury Skripal case is a very good example, and I think when we look history back after 5 or 10 years, we will notice that that was one of the turning points. That, I think, particularly sparked the EU, the NATO, other countries to do more on countering hybrid. There was a big realization that followed that. For countries that are not as big as the UK, we would often wish to internationalize our challenges, because if international community is united, that is security for us. But here, I think very soon after the poisoning in Salisbury, use of the chemical warfare agent, United Kingdom internationalized this question, among other things, went to the NATO, to the EU, other tracks, OPCW, and then United Nations. And I think very soon NATO adopted a strong stance, but so did EU, more or less a similar text. There, I think immediately you had 35 Western countries supporting, all stating quite strongly, condemning what had happened. We should not do this type of things amongst the civilian population, saying that most likely this came from Russia. There's no other plausible explanation. And as you said, this was followed under the cooperation, under the umbrella of international cooperation. I think 29 countries expelled Russian diplomats, which was also an unprecedented thing. This process, this cooperation, I think, empowered many countries. It gave rhythm to many countries' response. Should there not have been that type of a cooperation, and there wasn't, for example, in 1939, I think many of our countries who would have just sat in their capitals without international cooperation, how many out of the EU, NATO countries, out of those 29, would have acted the way they did if they should have only dealt with this question in their capitals and thinking, should I do something? So here, I think international cooperation and unity actually is often more valuable than we do realize. Yes, in the international cooperation and related to the EU, a few examples. I think nationally we are speaking to the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter and others, which is useful, and this discussion will continue, because this is not only about hybrid, this is about a lot more bigger things for the humankind as well. But if we speak in a group of countries, or if the EU is in contact with the social media platforms, it might be heavier than some of the single countries. OPCW incident last year, hack, sparked the work within the EU, and I think this week EU is about to, well, it is a first step, to approve a mechanism on attributing and sanctioning hostile cyber attacks. And what that will mean practically, we don't know yet, but things are processes. But I think this doing things together, attributing cyber attacks, is anything that suits very well to international cooperation. So is the deterrence. Yes, we build deterrence nationally, but if we do it internationally, it is better. I think part of the lessons learned from the Salisbury incident is a rapid alert system that the EU now has. Should something happen, particularly in a systematic malign disinformation attacks, EU countries have points of contacts now that we can call and say that, hey, now there's this and that kind of attack on us. Informing about it, maybe it's on others as well. But I think more importantly, building the line and spreading our narrative and what is really happening in order then to be supported in sort of the global media environment. Hopefully that to some extent answers the question. Thanks.
Thank you, Mikko, once again.